Let me introduce Ed Braddy. He is the mayor of Gainesville. He served as the executive director of the American Dream Coalition from 2010 until his mayorship in April of this year. He also served as a Gainesville City Council commissioner from 2002 to 2008. During the course of public service, he has worked extensively with elected officials and community leaders in cities around the United States to promote cost-effective solutions to problems with transportation and growth management issues. We had him up. CAPER is Citizens Alliance for Property Rights. We're headquartered in the state of Washington. We had him up last March at our annual meeting. He's really great. He's got a lot of great things to say about Florida. He served on numerous Florida boards as well as co-hosting a local radio show, WXBY FM. So welcome, if you would, Ed Braddy. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, and just a little note of interest. I did not inform my campaign manager I was flying to Seattle to give a presentation because we were about a week and a half away from the general election. But anyway, and also we actually started the session late, and that's my fault. My PowerPoint presentation did not download correctly. Somewhere between my room and here, I guess I corrupted my file by moving the thumb drive from my right pocket to my left pocket. So you're going to hear me just go on notes. Originally, I guess it was printed in there that my title is managing a left-leaning city, but I'll tell you why that's not the right title. I got to take a trip with my daughter not too long ago, very recently, and she was forced to sit in close proximity to me because we were on an airplane, so the 16-year-old couldn't tune me out like she wants to. So I let her know that, you know, I'm going to be giving a presentation pretty soon, letting people know how it is, you know, what it's like to be a mayor. And I asked her if I could run some of this by her, and she said no. She went back to trying to read her book, and I said, well, you don't understand, you know, Gainesville's a pretty big city. It's a lot of stuff. So, you know, certainly, you know, don't you want to know what happens here? And she's like, not really. And I said, well, wait a second. You know, don't you want to know what it takes to run a city? And she said, okay, Dad, you can tell me, but first you got to answer one question. I said, sure. She said, a cow, a deer, and a horse all eat the same stuff, grass. Yet a cow produces a patty, a horse clumps, and a deer pellets. Can you tell me why? And I said, no. She said, so you expect me to believe that you know how to run a city when you don't know crap? I said, yep, that's how I roll. So I'm going to tell you how to run a city. Now, actually, the real title would be Serving in a Left-Leaning City. And there's three parts to it. I could remember that from the PowerPoint. And basically, the first is to get elected. If you're in a left-leaning city and you're a conservative and an identifiable conservative, you've got to figure out a way to win. The second, then, is to, once in office, identify the challenges. And that may sound like a no-brainer, but the fact is, there are many moving parts, and it's like the old business management rule, the 80-20 rule. You know, if you just focus on the big issues, you can knock out 80% of the problem. And then lastly, it's the importance of setting goals. And so I'll try to get into a little bit of each of those. First of all, a little bit about Gainesville. It's a mid-sized city, we would probably classify. It's 130,000 people. In Florida, it's Florida's 13th largest city. It is those 130,000 are spread out over about 60-something acres, 67 acres. So our population density is about 2,200 per square mile, although in certain areas it has a higher density. 40% of the inhabitants have a bachelor's degree or higher, and it has about 10,000 businesses within its jurisdictional boundaries. About me, well, it was offered in the bio, so that pretty much covers it. Anyway, I ran for office because I had been in office from 2002 to 2008 and stepped out. And at the time, I was the last Republican on the commission then. There's no others. And then in 2011, one district commissioner was elected out of 7. So when I was elected in April of this year, I was the second Republican on a 7-member commission, and I guess the first Republican mayor. We have directly elected mayors. Previously, you go back years, the council would select the person who would, serve as the mayor pro tem or whatever. But anyway, I was a directly elected mayor. So in terms of getting elected, it's very important. The reason why it's relevant to how you serve once in office is because that's pretty much what the expectations are going to be set. And so I made a determination that, one, I'm not a phony person, so I'm not going to engage in phony euphemisms and that kind of thing in order to try to hoodwink voters. I had 6 years in public office. We served 3-year terms, so I didn't lose 2 years. 2 consecutive terms as a commissioner, so my politics were well known in Gainesville, and the opposition made sure they made known my politics because of the numerical advantage that the left wing or the progressives have. So the challenge then became, how do you frame your principles? Not abandon them, not compromise them or walk away from them or hide them. How do you frame them in a way that allows you to build a coalition? The only chance we had, I sat down with some friends in October of 12, and we started putting together a campaign plan. And we looked at all the precincts, we broke it down by historical voting patterns, and we could pretty much go through and say, in the bag, not a chance, not a chance, not a chance, and then figure out where the precincts that would be, competitive. And then we looked to develop a sort of a common language, because frankly, it's no good for me to go around, and yes, I do carry a copy of the Constitution with me, published by the Cato Institute, I would point out. But there's no good reason for me to go to a local forum of the, Women for Wise Growth or whatever and wave this at them and say, this is what we're going to do. But what we wanted to do is come up with some common terms that I thought had good appeal. And one of those is just, back to the basics. Ed, what are you running for? I'm running to get back to the basics. And that had appeal across the board. It sounds very simple, but with good reason. For limited government conservative types like me, if you're focused on back to the basics, then you're not chasing rainbows with other people's money. You don't have time. If you're poor and black, and we have a lot of that in Gainesville, unfortunately, there's the equity argument that they have, and that they've been left behind. And so that appeals to them, because back to the basics means not coming up with premium, high-end, rapid transit to the suburbs. It means, hey, how about you increase the frequencies on the poor routes we have right now? And how about you fix the street lights at the time? Tea Party folks loved the back to the basics because it focused on limited government, fiscal discipline, free markets, So, and crusty Democrats, which are distinguished from crunchy Democrats. Crusty Democrats became Democrats because they want to help the poor. And we may eventually disagree down the road on a governance strategy, whether we pursue a redistributionist strategy or we pursue a market-oriented strategy, which is what I prefer. But certainly identifying the problem, and this gets that 80-20 thing, the problem was progressive policies in Gainesville that was making it, that was really punitive on the poor, increasing taxes and fees, and making the city an unaffordable city. And that was the second term we came up with. And none of this was poll test. Well, this is how it's poll tested. Knock on the door. Hi, I'm Ed Braddy. I'm running for mayor. What do you think? So affordability just became a big word for us. And so most people get it when they say, this city is a great city to live in. And I love my city. I moved there to go to college, and I never left. In fact, I might still be in college. I'm not sure I finished my history class, that last paper I was supposed to do. So I'm there, and it's a great place, great natural resources, but it is increasingly unaffordable to live in. I learned about the whole smart growth movement and the housing bubbles and all that because it really had a devastating effect on Gainesville. So with that coalition, we made it to a runoff against the incumbent mayor and beat him in the runoff. I got 56% of the vote. It was a good, nice little upset. And so 19 former mayors and commissioners signed a public letter begging the public not to vote for me because I would disagree with the consensus they have formed. So 5 of those still serve with me now, so I like to make them as uncomfortable as I can every chance I get. But bottom line is I took office. So then it became, how do you identify the challenges here? As I said, there are many issues. It's funny, local government, and this is really of its own making. I mean, when you think about, if you go back 25 years, 30 years, you fix the roads, make sure you had a lot of police officers. And I'm not talking for big cities with a big machine mayor. I'm talking about mid-sized cities and smaller, which is where most people live all around the country, This is where someone from the Garden Club or the local Kiwanis Club, chairman can get elected to the council and they put in a good 2 to 3 years and then they go do something else. But my sort of pseudo-academic approach is that around the 1990s, government decided at the local level that we're going to solve all the world's problems. And so local government started getting more and more active and more hands-on and more progressive in that sense. So, I mean, I have commissioners tweet things about, yes, cities can save the world, and our local government signed on to the ICLEI sustainable development thing to reduce carbon and all that stuff. And, I'm not here to argue one way or the other on that, other than the solution set. What are your solutions? But the point is that instead of going from basically a sort of a defensive approach to governance, which is just make sure your community's safe, make sure you can facilitate business, make sure the parks are clean and stuff like that. It became, how can we retrofit the city to meet some future ideal? In fact, the election largely hinged on that, because in stark contrast to words like affordability and back to the basic was this vision of Gainesville at the next level, that my opponent had, and we actually got out front and framed it that way so that he had to defend it. We ran a TV commercial in which, since I drink a lot of coffee, coffee, that's all, the only place you can go to and not find anything that says coffee is now a coffee shop. You go there and it's called everything else, So we ran a little clever commercial where the first person goes up and orders a mocha latte upside down soy backflip with, hint of cinnamon or something like that. And I just go up and I say, can I just get a cup of coffee? And the guy looks at me like I'm a freak. And so then we make the point that, government's kind of like that, isn't it? And, let's get back to the basics. And it tended to work because, my opponent was really upset by that, and it made, try to say, government, anyway. He said among many things. Anyway, so back to this. So once you get in office, you look at the council itself. Now, like I said, I'm not in a strong mayor system, although I did learn I can declare martial law by the charter, so I'm holding that in my pocket. But it's a council manager form. So actually, there's not one group you have to outmaneuver, which is the other elected colleagues. There's also the professional staff that you have to be concerned with. The council members, the elected officials, oftentimes run on 1 or 2 issues that are very important to them, and then they are not so attentive to everything else. And I'm not going to fault that because, quite frankly, there's so many things I'm not, an expert in. There's this belief, I think, among the progressive class mostly, but I would say probably is certainly bipartisan, that we have this belief that you get elected to office and magically you're transformed into an expert on everything. And we're not, But under the council manager form, we turn to an a professional staff to manage the day-to-day. Now, there are pros and cons with that. One is that they're professionally competent and, they can, figure out budgets and all that stuff. But the con to that is they're going to work to outlast you. They're there, they have their own projects and their own goals and their own ambitions. If you want to go from being a city manager of a township to a mid-sized city to a big city, you better build some dang capital projects. You're not going to get that interview at the next level if you say, I maintain a steady budget and that's about it, filled some potholes. You're going to get it if you built new projects, if you redeveloped areas, if you did all these things. So the professional staff has their own agenda, and you've got to be on top of that. And the charter protects again, pro and con. You can't call up the public works director and say, what the heck are you doing, or why are you recommending this? You have to work through the charter officers, and so that can be a bit of a challenge. But here's the main point I was going to get to, what I've sort of discovered on my own, the big ta-da moment, and that is, it's not so much, Democrat, Republican, and all of that. What really separates elected officials is that some have a stewardship mindset. You are the steward of someone else's stuff. Think of the steward of an estate. What's your job? Just to maintain the value of the estate, enhance it if you can, but don't go crazy, and keep it safe. Versus the pursuit of the transformational project. It's a surprise. It's amazing how many people want to transform the city or wherever you live, and so it's the elected officials. They run on this, I will pursue a transformational project. Now here at the ADC we talk about transformational rail projects. Politicians, well, we've got to bring light rail. I know, for example, down in Tampa when I was with the ADC and we fought against the light rail there, it is amazing to go there and hear business leaders trash their city in order to try to make light rail sound good. They say, well, yeah, we can't compete with the inner city unless we have light rail. We got to have light rail to transform Tampa in this great city. Well, we're doing the same thing too. And with us, it's not or land use. Got to have high density mixed use so we can transform our downtown into this walkable place where everyone goes. And so this quest for the transformational project is really, I think, what drives a lot of people to run for office. And for us, it was energy. I thought when I took office, I would immediately tap in all my ADC resources and go on the offense with land use and with transportation. But what I got involved in was a transformational energy project. Now, 10 years ago when I left office, Gainesville, which is, some of you probably been there, we've called it Tree City, USA, because it has a big tree canopy. So 10 years ago, we were number one in the state for conservation per capita. The amount of energy per household used, we use less. Okay, and we had very affordable rates. Well, today, we still are number one for conservation per capita, but we're number one now in something else. That is the highest commercial rates in the state of Florida. And we're right behind it with residential rates for municipally owned utilities. And the commission, the mayor, we're the board of governors for utility. And here's why. Because being number one wasn't good enough. If you're a progressive politician, sorry, it's my Marco Rubio moment, except that's coffee, not water. If you're a progressive politician, being number one in Florida is not good enough. We had to get on the map. I guess some of our local leaders were tired of going to the League of Cities conferences and sitting in the back, and they wanted to be up front. So we pursued a biomass energy project. Now, just think of the irony of Tree City biomass fuel. But anyway, so we have built a 100 megawatt biomass plant. Now, some of you probably heard Austin, Texas has a biomass plant that they shut down. Ours is the same size, and so since theirs is not operational, Gainesville will have the country's largest biomass plant in the country operational in a few weeks. And what it has done to the regular folk, the affordable, the people who has been devastating. Like I said, we've moved our electric rates into among the highest classes in the state. We are obligated on a 30-year contract with the people that built this to pay roughly twice the market rate for fuel. We're locked in. We have a $70 million fixed annual cost whether we use it or not. We have gone from solid AA bond ratings for 3 ratings agencies. One is all of them have dinged us and given a warnings outlook. One has actually downgraded us to AA negative. So we have, and what's the response from our progressive politicians? Well, the utility bill is the one thing you can control. You can just turn down your thermostat. So basically, and of course, being that we are a green city, I mean, we really are. We have a high environmental consciousness in Gainesville. We've been doing that already. So what else can you do? At point you reach that point of diminishing returns, you can't do more. What I've told people is that basically we've adopted a policy to live like a miser. We have to follow each other around, turn down the water heater for fear of not being able to pay your bill. We have now roughly 2,000 households a month have their electricity shut off for their inability to pay. We serve 93,000 customers. So, and it's more difficult to attract cities. But here's one of the problems, keep in mind. As a university community, we still attract some business. So we can hide behind the university-affiliated businesses and say, oh, see, what's the problem? You know, we got all this good stuff going on. So, so that's one of the challenges as mayor I have to try to do that. And I did, before, a couple weeks ago, the general manager for the utility resigned. I had met with him and, you know, shared some of my concerns, and we put together a resignation package. And the city council accepted it and then called for an ethics investigation of me. So yeah, there you go. But anyway, for my, I guess my heavy-handed tactics or whatever. But anyway, so hopefully we will get this biomass thing behind us, and we'll be able to focus on land use and transportation, which is important. But here's the issue. Here's the key to all this. The problem with this, and where am I out on time? I've already busted. Oh, got about a minute. Great. Okay. So the problem with that is it transforms it does transform stuff. It transforms the means to the end. Instead of a utility that just, you know, works the daily grind, it becomes a political tool to transform society. Instead of transportation being a means to get A to B, it becomes the end in itself. When we start promoting super high densities and compact living, why? Not because people want it, but because it'll support transit. So transit is the end. You know, so that's where I see this going. So in conclusion, you know, on our side, when you serve in a city like this, you got to use the resources available to you. The ADC, I discovered the American Dream Coalition when I was a commissioner. I'm going to continue to work with the ADC and other organizations like the Reason Foundation and Heritage to find all that stuff. And then frame the issues. Get out front and frame the issues. Get in front of the vision thing. I was chastised during the campaign. Well, Ed's the guy who lacks a vision. He's the visionless candidate. And I would say, well, I do have a vision. My vision just doesn't cost $500 million on the taxpayers, but yours does. My vision is you pave the roads, you get the police officers out there, and you live within your means. Focus on the language. I talked about opportunity a lot. You know, because everyone aspires to opportunity, and I still talk about that, and I've kept this coalition together, and we talk about the opportunity of owning your own business. And it's been a joy to be with some people who, you know, their job, they started a cleaning business. They strip tile. But to me, that is every bit as important as one of the high-tech, biotech jobs spinning out of the university. Those are important too. And so so the common language allows you to keep, but I also think we need to develop more. You know, we need to sort of rally around a no more Detroits mantra. No more Detroits. Elected officials, the league, there's so many professional resources for for local government politicians, League of Cities, Conference of Mayors. And in terms of like just showing you how to look at a budget, those are all good. But when they get into policy advocacy, they all start to move left. And so we need something that moves right. And I think around this broad thing of no more Detroits, you can wrap pension in it, you can wrap comprehensive plans in it, you can, you assault on property rights, home ownership, mobility, all that can be captured, and it'll put us on offense instead of defense. And then just always remember, you know, who you're fighting for and who you're defending. You know, most people like where they live. That's why they live there. They don't want it transformed. They just want you to take care of the basic stuff. So with that, I guess I'll conclude. That's how I serve the city. So,